Most people think surviving a zombie outbreak comes down to weapons, barricades, and willpower. But in Resident Evil, you're already infected before you even know there's a problem. The T-virus doesn't wait for a bite. It comes through your tap water, your air vents, your morning coffee. And by the time you realize something is wrong, it's been inside you for hours. Let's start with the reason you never had a chance. The T-virus air-water transmission. Here's something nobody wants to hear. You don't need to get bitten to die in Raccoon City. You don't need to touch a zombie, step in infected blood, or make a single mistake. You just need to breathe. The T-virus was in Raccoon City's water supply before most residents even knew an outbreak was happening. The virus survives in water systems for up to 72 hours without a host. That means every glass of tap water, every shower, every pot of pasta boiled on the stove was a direct infection vector. People were drinking the apocalypse for breakfast and had zero idea. But water was only half the problem. In enclosed spaces, the virus goes airborne through ventilation systems. The Hive facility, Umbrella's underground research complex, spread infection across multiple floors simultaneously through its own air filtration system. The building's life support became the delivery mechanism. The thing designed to keep people alive is exactly what killed them. And here's where it gets worse. Fighting back creates new infection vectors. Burning or damaging infected tissue aerosolizes viral particles. Shooting a zombie in a hallway, running past a corpse, even being near a body that's been crushed by debris, all of it throws the virus into the air. Action kills you. Inaction kills you. There is no correct response. The September 1998 Raccoon City outbreak hit over 100,000 residents through simultaneous multi-vector transmission. Water, air, food, surface contact, all active at the same time. Immunocompromised individuals showed 100% symptom manifestation within 24 to 48 hours. Healthy adults lasted a little longer, but a little longer isn't survival. It's just a slower death. And before you say, just stay inside and wear a gas mask, the virus adapts its transmission method based on environmental conditions. Standard protective equipment became obsolete within hours of new strain emergence. Every precaution you can think of, the virus already has an answer for. You were never fighting zombies. You were fighting your own city's infrastructure. And infrastructure always wins. But at least airborne infection kills you slowly. The next threat doesn't give you that luxury. The Crimson Head mutation. Great, so you managed to kill a zombie. Congratulations. You just made everything worse. Here's the thing about the T-virus that nobody warns you about. Killing a zombie doesn't end the threat. It starts a countdown. Residual viral activity in the neural tissue doesn't stop when the body drops, it accelerates. The virus essentially reboots the brainstem, rewiring whatever's left for localized motor control, and within minutes of death, that corpse gets back up. But it doesn't come back as the same slow, stumbling mess you just put down. It comes back as a Crimson Head. The name comes from the blood-red skin caused by the accelerated mutation, and these things are a completely different problem. They're noticeably faster than standard zombies, closing distance at a sprint instead of a shuffle. They're more aggressive, more relentless, and here's the part that should terrify you. They attack with razor-sharp claws instead of just biting. That slow, clumsy grab-and-chomp routine, gone. A Crimson Head charges you down and slashes. The safe distance you relied on before is now meaningless. But wait, it gets worse when you do the math. Standard bullets don't actually kill zombies. They produce a few minutes of temporary incapacitation. That's it. Actual corpse destruction requires fire, complete dismemberment, or headshots precise enough to obliterate the brain. So every single encounter now costs you double the resources. Rounds to drop the zombie the first time. Rounds to deal with the Crimson Head version minutes later. And that second fight is harder, faster, and more dangerous than the first. In the Spencer Mansion, every zombie you dropped and didn't burn was a future Crimson Head waiting to happen. Every single one. The mansion became a ticking time bomb of reanimation, and most of the people inside had zero idea it was coming. Now picture this over a 6-day survival window. You fight through a hallway, spend precious ammunition dropping 3 zombies, and push forward. Minutes later, that hallway behind you has 3 Crimson Heads in it. You've essentially been filling every room you cleared with faster, deadlier versions of the things you just barely survived. Your escape route is now more dangerous than the path ahead. The cruelest part? This is a punishment for fighting back. The reward for winning a zombie encounter is a harder version of the exact same fight on a timer you can't see. And every bullet you spend digging yourself out of that hole is a bullet you won't have for what comes next. Speaking of things you won't have enough of, let's talk about the resource problem that makes all of this completely unsustainable. Limited resource. Scarcity. Let's do some math. And I promise the numbers are worse than you think. You've got a handgun, maybe a shotgun if you're lucky. Standard ammunition capacity across Raccoon City sits between 50 and 120 rounds per weapon type. type. Sounds decent, right? Now consider that an average zombie requires 3 to 8 rounds just to go down. Not die, go down, temporarily. We already covered what happens after that. So let's say you're plotting an escape route through the city. A moderate number of zombie encounters along that path demands 240 rounds minimum to stay ahead of the threat. Total scavenging yields across a realistic route through Raccoon City? 200 to 300 rounds combined. You're already in deficit before you even factor in liquors dropping from ceilings, before you account for missed shots under panic, before you consider that half the buildings you'd loot are already picked clean or too dangerous to enter. But ammunition is just the first item on the checklist. Let's keep going. Food. Sealed umbrella environments were rationed for 12 people maximum. The Raccoon City outbreak displaced over 100,000 residents simultaneously. There is no meaningful food supply for civilian survivors. That's not an exaggeration. That's arithmetic. Power and fuel systems across the city failed within 48 hours of the outbreak. Backup generators ran 6 to 18-hour cycles before total depletion. Once those died, so did the lighting, communications, electronic locks, security systems. Everything a survivor might use to create even a temporary safe zone. Gone. Water. Potable water became completely inaccessible after ground supply contamination on September 26, 1998. Emergency rations could sustain survivors for roughly 72 hours. The outbreak ran for 6 full days before military response. That's double the water supply window. You're dehydrated and weakening long before anyone shows up to help. And medical supplies? Herbs restore approximately 40% of physical health. That's useful for a cut or a bruise, but they cannot reverse viral damage. They cannot cure T-virus infection. The only thing that could do that was Umbrella's antiviral compounds, which were never distributed to civilian populations. Ever. So every injury you sustain is permanent progress toward death. And the one thing that could actually save you was locked in a corporate vault somewhere while the city burned. Every survival resource, ammunition, food, power, water, medicine, runs out before the crisis ends. You're not losing a war of attrition. You lost it before it started. But running out of supplies assumes you're navigating a normal city. Raccoon City isn't normal. The buildings themselves are trying to kill you. Environmental death traps. Let's say you've rationed perfectly. You've avoided every zombie, conserved every bullet, and somehow kept yourself alive through pure discipline. Congratulations. The building you're standing in is about to kill you anyway. Here's the thing about Umbrella facilities. They weren't designed to keep people safe. They were designed to keep things contained. And there's a massive difference between those two goals. Every research lab, every underground complex, every hospital basement was built with one assumption baked into the architecture. Eventually, something will escape, and when it does, everything inside needs to die. The Hive facility didn't even bother with an evacuation plan. The Red Queen's containment protocol was simple. Seal every exit and flood the entire complex with halon gas. No warning, no countdown, no escape window. Just locked doors and poison air. That's not a safety system. That's an execution chamber with an AI pulling the lever. The police station laboratory triggered automatic firewall closures the moment a security breach was detected. The hospital basement flooded lower levels with active electrical hazards running through the water. You're not navigating a building. You're navigating a kill box that someone got paid very well to engineer. But here's where it gets genuinely absurd. Umbrella built cascading failure protocols into these places. A single security breach in one zone would trigger mass sterilization fires across multiple adjacent zones simultaneously. Think about what that means. The same breach that might create your only exit would seal and incinerate every room around it. You open one door to escape, and 3 hallways behind you become crematoriums. The building punishes you for trying to leave, and the variety of ways these places can kill you is almost impressive. Freezer units running at cryogenic temperatures sat in the same facility as incinerators hot enough to reduce a tyrant to ash in seconds. We're talking industrial cremation levels of heat, hundreds and hundreds of degrees, right next to rooms cold enough to kill you from hypothermia in minutes. Exposure to either extreme without protection is a death sentence. Treatment for those conditions requires medical resources that, as we already covered, don't exist anymore. Then there are the purpose-built containment zones, laser grids, spike traps, controlled explosive demolition systems embedded directly into the walls of tyrant experiment areas. These weren't industrial accidents waiting to happen. These were professionally designed killing floors meant to neutralize bioweapons that got loose. The fact that you're a human being and not not a tyrant doesn't matter. The building can't tell the difference. It doesn't care. Water-based hazards alone, submerged passages, flooded reactors, chemical coolant systems are responsible for a staggering number of deaths across the franchise. Players drown in them. Characters die in cutscenes to them. Environmental kills from the building itself rival direct zombie encounters as a cause of death. Nearly as many people die from the architecture as from the monsters. That's the darkest joke in all of Resident Evil. Umbrella knew their experiments would fail. They knew containment would breach. So they built facilities that treat every living thing inside as a target. Zombies and survivors die with equal efficiency. The architecture doesn't discriminate, but at least a building stays in one place. It follows rules. It triggers on protocols. The next threat on this list doesn't follow rules, doesn't stop, and it's specifically hunting you. The Tyrant Stalker factor. Everything up to this point has been impersonal. Disease doesn't know your name. Resource scarcity doesn't care who you are. A building collapsing on you isn't personal. But a tyrant? A tyrant has your scent. It knows where you went, and it is coming specifically for you. Let me give you the numbers so you understand exactly how screwed you are. The T-103 Tyrant weighs 427 kilograms. That's nearly half a metric ton of engineered muscle and bone moving at 15 to 20 kilometers per hour. For context, that's faster than the average human jog. You're not outrunning this thing. You're just choosing which direction you'd like to die from, but speed isn't even the real problem. The real problem is that it heals. Damaged tissue regenerates within 30 to 60 seconds of injury. You shoot it, it stumbles, it gets back up. You shoot it again, same thing. Standard ammunition requires somewhere between 180 and 240 rounds to achieve sustained incapacitation. Not death, incapacitation. That's 10 times the realistic carrying capacity of most survivors. You would need to be hauling a small armory on your back just to slow it down temporarily, and you've already burned through most of your ammo on regular zombies 3 sections ago. Here's where it gets worse. A Tyrant's hearing range extends beyond 200 meters. Its olfactory tracking maintains detection accuracy within 2 to 3 hours of your last known position, even across exterior environments. Running doesn't create distance. It buys minutes. You can sprint through 3 city blocks, barricade yourself inside a building, and it will still find you because it can literally smell where you've been. And before you think, well, trained soldiers could handle this, no, they couldn't. Umbrella's own closed environment testing showed Tyrants achieved an 89% success rate against trained military commandos. Professional soldiers with full tactical gear, coordinated teams, and heavy weaponry still died 89% of the time. Civilian survival estimates sat at 2 to 5%. These are people who train for combat every single day, not exhausted civilians who haven't slept in 72 hours and are rationing their last 12 bullets. So, you can't outrun it, you can't outgun it. Fans love to bring up theoretical vulnerabilities like acid rounds, extreme cold, or crushing force. Cool. All of those require laboratory access, specialized equipment, or industrial machinery that no realistic civilian survivor has available to them during an active outbreak. The debate about whether Tyrants are unbeatable versus unbeatable for civilians ends at the word civilians. That's you. But here's the detail that genuinely disturbed me researching this. The Nemesis variant from Resident Evil 3 demonstrated adaptive learning across encounters. Every single engagement it had with Jill Valentine produced improved tactical counters to her specific weapon choices. If you used a shotgun, it adjusted its approach distance. If you used explosives, it changed its movement patterns. Your strategy works exactly once. The second time you try it, the Tyrant has already adapted. You're not fighting a brute. You're fighting a brute that gets smarter every time it fails to kill you. So let's reframe the math one final time. You can't outrun it. You can't carry enough ammunition to stop it. It regenerates faster than you can damage it. It tracks you by smell for hours after you've fled. It killed 89% of trained soldiers. And it learns from every single thing you do. You are not fighting a Tyrant. You are delaying the inevitable. But at least a Tyrant is one thing. One terrifying, unkillable thing, but still just one. What happens when the zombies themselves stop acting like individuals and start acting like something far more coordinated? The hive mind mentality. Up to this point, everything I've told you about zombies has assumed one thing: that they're stupid, slow, shambling, disoriented, exploitable, and individually, they are. You can outmaneuver a single zombie. You can bait it into a doorway, sidestep it, put a table between you and it. One zombie is a problem problem you can solve. But here's where the rules change, and nobody gives you the memo. When zombie concentrations hit critical mass, somewhere around 50 or more in a localized area, they stop behaving like individuals. The shambling idiots you've been outsmarting suddenly start demonstrating coordinated behavior, herding tactics, synchronized approach vectors, environmental manipulation. They start moving obstacles to cut off your exits. They funnel you into choke points. They flank. Let me say that again. Zombies, flanking. These are creatures that couldn't figure out a doorknob 48 hours ago, and now they're executing military-grade tactical maneuvers, and the reason is chemical. Queen and hive mind entities documented across the franchise coordinate zombie behavior through pheromone-based chemical signaling. The swarm isn't a group of zombies. It's a single distributed organism wearing 30 different bodies, and you cannot hide from it. Pheromone coordination allows infected to distinguish between other infected and uninfected humans at distances up to 150 meters. You can't disguise yourself. You can't smear zombie guts on your clothes and blend in. You can't approach a swarm without being immediately flagged as a target. The organism knows exactly what you are and exactly where you are before you even see it. Here's the thing that makes this genuinely terrifying. Swarm attack patterns show 3 times increased lethality compared to individual zombie encounters. That's not just because there are more of them. Multiple infected exchanging bodily fluids with a single target compounds infection vectors in ways a single bite simply cannot replicate. One zombie grabs you, you might fight it off. 30 zombies operating as a coordinated unit, you're getting hit from angles you didn't even know existed. Now, there is one partial counter. Removing the queen entity reduces swarm coordination by 60 to 70%, but that still leaves 30 to 40% of the coordination intact. That's still enough to kill you, and good luck identifying which zombie in a horde of 50 is the one broadcasting the chemical signals. The other option is isolation. Separating yourself from other survivors reduces swarm targeting by roughly 40%. Sounds great until you realize that being alone means 0 collaborative defense, 0 resource pooling, and 0 help when you inevitably get cornered. The only tactical option that helps you individually destroys every group survival strategy simultaneously. So let's reframe what you're actually dealing with. You're not fighting 30 zombies. You're fighting a single 30 zombie organism that thinks tactically, adapts to your movement, cuts escape routes before you reach them, and uses the environment against you. It flanks, it herds, it corners, and it does all of this with bodies that feel 0 pain and require 0 rest. The mental model you had of zombies being manageable, that was based on fighting individuals. The second you encounter a swarm, every assumption you made becomes a liability. And the worst part is, you won't know your assumptions were wrong until you're already surrounded. But even if you could somehow avoid every swarm, outrun every tyrant, and conserve every last bullet, there's one factor that determines your survival before any of that matters, and you have absolutely 0 control over it. Genetic compatibility, luck. Everything up to this point has been about what you do wrong, bad decisions, poor resource management, not running when you should have been running. But this one's different. This isn't about what you do. It's about what you are, and you don't get a say in it. The T-virus doesn't treat every human body the same way. Your body's reaction to infection is determined by your genetic makeup, your unique biological blueprint. Before you ever stepped foot in Raccoon City, before the outbreak even started, your fate was already written into your DNA. Here's what most people get wrong about zombie outbreaks. They assume infection equals zombification. It doesn't. Most exposed humans do develop full infection and eventually become zombies. But that's not the only outcome. Some people's bodies reject the virus so violently that every system shuts down at once, killing them through acute organ failure before transformation even begins. And the ones who do become zombies? They're not safe either. Prolonged exposure to certain T-virus strains can trigger secondary mutations, a process called VXT, that transforms an already zombified human into something far worse, faster, smarter, skinless. You know them as lickers. Becoming a standard zombie is actually the middle outcome, not the worst one. Let that sink in for a second. The best case scenario for most people isn't survival. It's becoming the least horrifying version of a monster. Natural immunity does exist. Roughly 10% of the human population carries specific genetic markers that make them functionally resistant to T-virus integration. 1 in 10. Sounds almost hopeful until you realize that means 9 out of 10 people are guaranteed to lose. And here's where it gets interesting, because this opens up up one of the biggest quiet debates in the Resident Evil community. Chris Redfield, Claire Redfield, Jill Valentine, Leon Kennedy. We celebrate these characters for their skill, their training, their ability to fight through impossible odds. But what if the real reason they survived wasn't exceptional combat ability? What if it was exceptional genetics? Think about it. These protagonists walk through environments saturated with airborne viral particles, get grabbed by infected creatures, wade through contaminated water, and somehow never turn. We call it plot armor. But the lore actually provides a scientific explanation. They might simply be part of that 10%. Their DNA decided they would survive before they ever picked up a gun. And the cruelest part? Umbrella had the tools to shift those odds. Vaccination and pre-exposure treatment protocols existed in their research that could theoretically improve survival chances significantly. The cure, or at least a meaningful preventative measure, was real. It was sitting in locked drawers, in burning buildings, in facilities rigged to self-destruct. Umbrella never distributed it to civilian populations, not because it didn't work, because civilians weren't the point. So here's the existential gut punch this whole section has been building toward. You have no way to know your compatibility status before exposure. There's no test you can take, no symptom to watch for, no early warning system. Your DNA already decided whether infection means immediate death, zombie transformation, or eventual mutation into something the games don't even bother giving a proper name. And you'll find out the answer at the exact moment it's too late to matter. Every section before this gave you something to fight against, a strategy you could have used, a mistake you could have avoided. This one doesn't. This is the one variable you can't train for, can't plan around, and can't shoot your way through. Your survival was never fully in your hands. But even if you beat those odds, even if your genetics land you in that miraculous 10%, there's one final problem. And it has nothing to do with zombies at all. Global sterilization protocols. Let's say you did it. You survived the T-virus in the air and water. You burned every corpse before Crimson Heads could reanimate. You rationed your ammunition down to the last bullet, navigated buildings designed to kill you, outran a tyrant that should have ended you 3 times over, outsmarted a coordinated swarm, and your genetics didn't betray you. Congratulations. You're one of the most resilient human beings who ever lived. The government is going to kill you anyway. On the night of September 30th, 1998, the US government authorized the sterilization strategy for Raccoon City. At sunrise on October 1st, missiles hit. Not a targeted strike, not a surgical operation. Total erasure. The blast leveled the entire urban environment and every biological specimen inside it, human, zombie, and otherwise. There was no margin of survival built into the plan. There was no margin at all, and the reasoning was brutally simple. The outbreak had reached a point of no return, and the only acceptable response was to wipe Raccoon City off the map with a single, overwhelming missile strike. They weren't trying to contain the outbreak anymore. They were trying to make sure nobody could ever prove it happened. Here's the part that should genuinely disturb you. The estimated civilian casualties exceeded 100,000 people. That number wasn't accidental. The entire zone was classified as a total containment scenario with zero tolerance for survivors exiting the perimeter. Read that again. Zero tolerance. It didn't matter if you were immune. It didn't matter if you'd fought your way to the edge of the city. If you were inside the line when the missiles came down, your survival was considered a containment failure, not a success story. But wait, it gets worse. The strike wasn't designed to leave anything behind to monitor. The point was annihilation. One strike, total destruction. Nothing left to check. They weren't planning follow-up operations because the plan was to make sure follow-up operations were unnecessary. You don't sterilize the ashes when the goal is to leave no ashes at all. The timeline is the cruelest detail. Survivors had roughly a 6-day window between the outbreak reaching critical mass and the missiles falling. Not because the government was trying to give anyone time to escape, because operational logistics and political authorization took that long to finalize. There's credible speculation that the delay was intentional, used to document mutation progression before destroying the evidence along with the witnesses. And Raccoon City wasn't treated as a tragedy. It was treated as a proof of concept. Resident Evil canon establishes that the sterilization became official doctrine. Any facility, any city, any region showing irreversible outbreak conditions was authorized for immediate destruction. You see references to these protocols in Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village. The playbook didn't die with Raccoon City. It was refined, improve, made faster. That's the real horror of this entire video. Every section described a different reason you can't survive. The T-virus finds you before you know it's there. Crimson Heads punish you for fighting back. Resources bleed dry no matter how careful you are. The buildings themselves are designed to kill you. The Tyrant hunts you with precision you can't outrun. The Swarm coordinates against you like a single organism. Your own DNA might have already decided your fate before the first zombie ever appeared. And if somehow, against every odd, you made it through all of that, the solution deployed to save everyone else considers your death an acceptable rounding error, there was never a version of this where you win. The doctrine exists. The authorization protocols are already written. The next Raccoon City isn't a question of if, it's a question of when, and the people making those plans already know you won't make it out. If you enjoyed this video and want to see everything 28 days after Gets Wrong about survival, click the video on the screen now.